Help me, Tom," Emma cried out as 3 aggressive HOA enforcers cornered her at our front door. They were trying to force her to sign up with their association. When she refused, the biggest of the bunch shoved her so hard she hit the ground and was hurt. That was their first and biggest mistake. What they didn't know, I'm a veteran with 10 years of Army training under my belt and I don't take threats lightly. Within seconds, all 3 of them were on the ground. The neighborhood was in shock, but what they didn't realize was this was just the tip of the iceberg. What happened wasn't some random act of aggression. It was the start of something far more twisted. A plan that had been quietly taking shape for years, and I was about to uncover the terrifying truth behind it. Leave a comment if you're watching it. This story is going to shake you. It began about 2 weeks earlier when I first started to sense something off with how our HOA was behaving. I'm not the kind of guy to complain over small things, but with my military background, I've been trained to notice patterns, to read people. And something about this wasn't adding up. The so-called HOA president Lydia Collins had been targeting certain houses with what appeared to be random citations. But my instincts told me it wasn't random at all. I started to pay attention. Lydia would drive past our house like clockwork every morning, at lunchtime, and again in the evening. It wasn't casual. It was calculated. And then there was the way her tone shifted whenever Emma's name came up, or the strange questions she kept asking about my job, my background, even what time we typically went to bed. What kind of HOA president needs to know when a homeowner goes to sleep? That's when I knew something deeper was going on. I decided to keep a record of everything, every odd email, every tense interaction, every time I noticed her staring at our home from across the yard. And believe me, there was plenty to document. Lydia wasn't just enforcing HOA rules, she was obsessed with something, and I had a gut feeling it wasn't about neighborhood cleanliness. At first, Emma thought I was reading too much into it, but she's sharp. She started noticing the strange behavior too. "Tom," she told me one evening, "that woman gives me the creeps. Something's seriously wrong with her." That's when I knew we needed backup. I called up Rico, one of my old Army buddies. He runs a small electronics shop downtown now and knows his way around cameras and recording gear. Nothing flashy, just solid, reliable tech. He walks with a cane thanks to an injury he got overseas, but his mind is as sharp as ever, and I trust him more than anyone. "Rico," I said, "I think something bad's brewing here. I need your help." He didn't even pause. "You know I've got your back, brother. Let's get some eyes on this and figure out what we're up against." While Rico helped me set up surveillance equipment around the house, Emma took matters into her own hands too. As head librarian downtown, she has access to public records and archives that most people don't even know exist. And what she found, it changed everything. "Tom," she whispered one night, her face pale as she looked at her screen, "Lydia Collins doesn't exist. There's nothing, no school records, no job history, not even an address before 18 months ago. It's like she just a broken bar appeared." My stomach dropped. From everything I've seen in the military, people don't just show up with no history unless they're hiding something or running from it. So we kept digging. Neighbors said Lydia started popping up in the community around 10 months earlier, volunteering, organizing events, helping seniors carry groceries. She even started a fundraiser to repair the playground. Everyone loved her. She seemed like the perfect neighbor. So when the former HOA president moved away last year, nobody questioned it when Lydia ran for the position. She was the only candidate and won easily. But something about all that goodwill didn't sit right with me. It felt staged, like someone working hard to build up a persona and earn trust for some hidden purpose. Then Rico ran her financials. She had bought her home in cash, $180,000. No mortgage, no loans, just a straight-up purchase. And get this, her credit history only showed up 18 months ago, at the same time she moved here. It was all fake. Constructed. "Tom," Rico said, showing me the paperwork, "I've seen shady identity work before, but this is military grade. Somebody spent serious time and money crafting her identity." The question I saw why? That's when we installed the real surveillance. A few discrete cameras, some recording devices, and a tracker to log every time Lydia passed by our property. And what we found in just a few days was straight-up chilling. She passed our house at the exact same time every single day. She'd slow down, stare through the windows. Sometimes she'd stop her car and sit there in broken bar for 10 to 15 minutes, just watching. She'd scribble things onto a clipboard, snap pictures with her phone, and more than once, I caught her walking around the perimeter of our yard. She would sneak onto the property at night, assuming no one was watching, but the most unsettling evidence came from an audio recording Rico had placed near our front entrance. One late evening, the device picked up Lydia in her own yard, speaking to herself in a voice that sent chills down my spine. What she said was haunting. "She doesn't love him the way I do. Tom is meant to be with me." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks, because that voice, it suddenly rang a bell. It was eerily familiar. I couldn't immediately pinpoint it, but somewhere deep in my memory, I knew I'd heard it before, and not in the recent past. It was like a shadow from my past, something I had buried and tried to forget. One of the surveillance videos showed Lydia standing in her yard around midnight, staring directly at my bedroom window, but what truly unsettled me was what she held in her hand. It looked exactly like a key to my home. How did she get it? And more importantly, what was she planning to do with it? The next morning, I couldn't shake the sound of that voice. I kept replaying Rico's recording over and over again. With each listen, I became more certain that I recognized her. Emma noticed my growing fixation and grew concerned, but I couldn't drop it. "There's something about her voice," I kept telling Emma. "I've heard it before, I just can't figure out where or when." That's when Emma came up with a brilliant idea. She suggested I sift through my old work file as a look for any voicemails or recordings from past clients or staff. I spent the entire afternoon rummaging through boxes in the garage, going through old documents and hoping something would jog my memory. Eventually, I stumbled upon a folder filled with voicemails and messages from about 3 years ago, back when I'd had issues with a freelance bookkeeper I had hired from a town roughly 60 miles away. Her name was Amy Walsh. From the beginning, she had been a problem. The moment I played one of Amy's old messages and compared it with Rico's recent recording of Lydia, everything clicked. The voices weren't just similar, they were an exact match. Same inflection, same subtle accent, the same peculiar way of stressing certain phrases. Lydia Collins was Amy Walsh, and Amy Walsh was someone I'd hoped I'd never cross paths with again. Understanding who Amy really was is key to understanding why my family was suddenly in danger. 3 years ago, I'd needed help with the books for my garage business. I was referred to this woman from Millbrook, a town about an hour north. Initially, Amy came across as competent and quiet. She kept to herself and got the job done, or so it seemed. But problems began cropping up almost immediately. Small amounts of cash would go missing. She'd arrive late or skip work altogether, always with elaborate excuse as a car trouble, family issues. Customers started complaining that she was rude or distracted, and then her behavior toward me started to shift. She began making physical contact during conversations, light touches on my arm. She'd make personal comments, ask intrusive questions about my marriage and our routines. I stayed polite but professional, thinking she'd get the hint. Instead, she seemed to misread everything. She'd bring me coffee without asking, linger long after hours to help with tasks that didn't need doing, and the way she looked at me, there was something intense and off about it. Things escalated one afternoon when I was alone in the office, going over invoices. Amy walked in with some documents for signature. Instead of handing them over like normal, she leaned way too close over my shoulder. I asked her to give me space, and out of nowhere, she grabbed my face and kissed me. I was stunned. Before I could even respond, she pulled back with a wild look in her eyes and said, "I know you feel the same way, Tom. I see it in how you look at me." I stood up immediately, backing away. "Amy, that's completely inappropriate," I told her. "You're fired. I need you to collect your things and leave right now." But instead of being embarrassed or apologizing, she went into a meltdown, screaming that I led her on, insisting that I had feelings for her, that there was something between us I just wouldn't admit. "You were kind to me," she yelled. "You cared. You asked about my life. We have a connection." I explained, as calmly as I could, that being courteous isn't the same as interest. But she wasn't hearing it. As I escorted her out, she turned and said something that echoed in my mind for months. "You'll regret this, Tom. One day you'll realize we were meant to be." She doesn't get you like I do. At the time, I dismissed it as the emotional outburst of someone who just been let go for crossing major boundaries. I filed a police report, kept all the documentation in case she tried anything later, and moved on, assuming I'd never hear from Amy again. But I was wrong, very wrong. When I told Emma the entire story, her response was exactly what I expected. She didn't panic, she didn't cry, she got focused. "So let me get this straight," she said, her librarian mind already shifting into analysis mode. "Amy Walsh, the woman you fired 3 years ago for misconduct and theft, has reinvented herself as Lydia Collins. She moved here, spent nearly a year crafting a fake identity, got elected HOA president, and is now using that position to torment USA and stalk you." Hearing it laid out like that made the full weight of the situation sink in. Emma's first instinct was to involve the police, and honestly, that might have been the right call, but I had another idea, one my military background told me could prove more useful in the long term. "Emma," I said, "if we go to the police now, what do we actually have? A recording that may not hold up in court, a few bits of circumstantial evidence, and an old incident report from another town. Amy or Lydia, or whatever name she's using now, has spent over a year earning trust in this community. People respect her. They like her. If we show up with nothing rock solid, it turns into a he said, she said situation." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Emma asked, though her expression told me she already suspected where I was going with this. "I'm saying we need real proof," I said. "Solid evidence, something no one, not even the biggest skeptic in town, could ignore." "Then we reveal everything at once to the neighborhood, to the police, to everyone in a way that leaves her no room to twist the truth." Emma stayed quiet for a moment, clearly thinking through the risks. Then she nodded. "All right," she said, "but you're not doing this on your own. If we're going to bring her down, we do it together." That's when I started reaching out to some old contacts from my military days, of people who could help dig into Amy's transformation and help us put together a case strong enough to stand. What we uncovered in the following days chilled us to the core. Amy Walsh had been orchestrating this for a long time, possibly since the moment I fired her. She'd spent months studying my life, tracking details about my business, our neighborhood, even Emma's job and habits. She'd saved up money, taken out loans, and changed her appearance entirely, gaining weight, dyeing her hair, even getting basic plastic surgery. Then she created an entirely new persona, moved into our town, and slowly climbed into a position where she could legally torment us while hiding in plain sight. But it got worse. When I worked with a contact in private investigation, we found out that Amy hadn't just been planning to cause trouble from a distance. She'd been gathering personal data on us in ways that crossed serious lines. Carlos, a man she'd hired to help with HOA enforcement, revealed just how deep her obsession went. She had been asking him deeply disturbing questions about our daily habits, how we secured our house, and even details about our bedroom window. But what shook Carlos wasn't the questions, it was her reaction when he questioned her about the photos she'd asked for. She smiled. Not the cheerful community leader smile everyone knows, but something cold and menacing. "Carlos," she whispered, "what if I told you Tom Rodriguez hurt someone 3 years ago? What if everything he's said about me is just a lie to cover up what really happened?" And Drama Nest fans, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Do you think Lydia's telling the truth, or is this just another chapter in her obsession? This is where things began to shift, and where my training in human behavior and strategy started to pay off. Amy thought she was in control, like this was a chess match she could win. What she didn't realize was that I'd spent years learning to stay 3 moves ahead. My plan wasn't complicated, but it needed perfect timing. I was going to give Amy exactly what she wanted until the moment I pulled back the curtain and exposed her to everyone. The first step, push her buttons strategically. I began intentionally violating minor HOA rules. I let the grass grow longer than allowed, left my trash cans out past pickup, parked my work truck in the driveway instead of the garage. Every violation was small, easy to dismiss as forgetfulness, but frequent enough to require a response from her in her role as HOA president. Just as I predicted, her reactions became less professional and more emotional. At first, her emails followed the usual HOA format, polite reminders about rules and community standards, but as I kept testing her patience, Her tone changed. She started writing long, emotional messages full of personal criticism, saying how disappointed she was, implying that I thought I was above the rules, and insisting that residents like me needed to be taught how to follow community expectations. Each word she wrote, I saved. I was building a pattern, a psychological profile in her own handwriting. Then came the turning point. I knew I had to confront her in a public setting with witnesses. Our neighborhood holds monthly home meetings and normally boring discussions about trash collection and landscaping. But this time, I made sure to stir things up. I texted around 20 neighbors, make sure you come to tonight's home meeting. You'll want to see this. At the meeting, I stood up and calmly questioned some of Lydia's recent decisions, and not accusing her, just asking fair, logical questions. Why were certain homes repeatedly cited while others weren't? Why did some people get several warnings and others none at all? As I spoke, I noticed something. People were paying attention. They were nodding, listening. And Amy? She was unraveling. Her calm mask was slipping. After the meeting, she cornered me in the parking lot. Tom, she said, voice trembling with restrained fury, I don't appreciate you undermining my authority like that. A broken bar authority in front of everyone in the neighborhood. That's when I had her exactly where I needed her. Lydia, I said pointedly, using the false name on purpose. I'm only asking the kind of questions any normal homeowner might ask. If that feels like an attack, maybe you need to ask yourself why. The look she gave me was filled with raw hatred and something else. A disturbing intensity in her eyes, a broken bar, something far too close to obsession. The very next day, Amy raised the stakes in a way that even I didn't fully expect. Despite knowing how far she might go, she sent Carlos and Diego to our home with instructions that crossed every ethical and legal boundary. Carlos told me later that Amy had given them explicit orders. Go to his house. Make sure Emma signs the HOA agreement willingly. Use whatever pressure it takes. The fact that she was targeting Emma, not me, made everything crystal clear. Her obsession wasn't just about revenge, it was personal. Carlos Santos was a former security guard. Amy had hired him under the pretense of compliance enforcement. He wasn't a bad man, just someone looking for steady work and willing to follow instructions without asking too many questions. But even Carlos was starting to question what he'd gotten involved in. The turning point came when he found a box of surveillance photos in Amy's vehicle, long-range shots of me at work, at the store, and even through the windows of our own home. This isn't normal HOA stuff, he said to Diego, who keeps pictures like this. This isn't neighborhood management. Diego Morales was a different story. A former club bouncer with a temper problem and heavy gambling debts. He was desperate for quick money. Amy had picked him up from an unemployment center, offering a large sum for security work. Diego didn't care about the details, he just needed fast cash to cover what he owed. Unlike Carlos, Diego seemed to enjoy the intimidation. Meanwhile, Rico had been quietly tracking Amy's movements using our simple home surveillance system. And what we uncovered shook us deeply. Amy wasn't just driving by our house during the day, she was actively watching USA at all hours. She'd park on different streets, using binoculars to monitor our home. She recorded Emma's schedule, noting when she left, when she returned. But the worst part? At night, she would sneak onto our property. We caught her on camera walking around the house, testing windows and doors, looking for vulnerabilities. The night before Carlos and Diego came to confront Emma, something happened that still makes my skin crawl. I was checking the outdoor cameras before bed and saw a figure in Amy's yard. Midnight, she was facing our bedroom window, staring. In her hand, something reflected the street light just enough for me to make out its shape. A key. And not just any key, it looked exactly like the one to our front door. How did she get it? And what did she intend to do with it? That's when it fully hit me. Amy's obsession had passed the point of harassment. This was now something far more dangerous. She had spent over a year meticulously planning this. And she wasn't just trying to ruin our peace, she wanted to invade our lives, personally and psychologically. She wanted to be in our home. She wanted to replace Emma. The idea that this woman might have access to our house while we slept made me physically ill. That night, I stayed awake and pieced together the final stage of the plan. By sunrise, I knew what had to be done. I would let the confrontation happen, but I would control every second of it. Rico would be nearby, positioned to record everything. Key neighbors would be alerted and watching, and I would have full documentation of Amy's true identity ready to expose her. Finally, Amy thought she was going to break us by confronting my wife, but she was walking straight into the trap that would tear down the lie she had built and show everyone exactly who she was. More than that, I knew I had to be ready for anything. If this got physical, I wouldn't hesitate. I'd spent 10 years in the military learning close-quarter combat skills I never imagined needing in civilian life. But if Amy's enforcers tried to harm Emma, I was fully prepared to defend her. Emma knew my background, but she'd never seen me in defense mode, and I prayed she never would. That's when I received a message from an unknown number. "I know what you're planning, but what you don't know is a broken bar. I've already been inside your home. I've touched your things. I've been closer to you than Emma ever has. Tonight, you'll realize we belong together, or Emma will disappear forever." Suddenly, I realized that this wasn't just about exposing Amy anymore. She was already a step ahead. How long had she been watching us? And what had she already done that we didn't know about? The morning of the confrontation, I woke up with a familiar feeling of the same one I'd get before a high-risk operation during my deployment. Focused, alert, adrenaline tightly controlled. There was no room for error. Emma's safety depended on precision. I set myself up in the garage, pretending to work on an engine. In reality, I was stretching, mentally preparing for a possible fight. From where I stood, I had a clear view of the yard, the street, and most importantly Amy's house across the road. Right at 10:30 a.m., a black pickup truck pulled up. Carlos was behind the wheel. He looked tense, clearly having doubts. Diego climbed out next to, bigger than I remembered, easily 6'2" and over 200 pounds. The kind of guy who looked like he was always ready for a brawl. As they approached our house, I spotted Amy's car parked a few houses down, angled just enough to give her a clear line of sight. She was watching everything unfold. Emma opened the door when they knocked. I could hear everything through our audio feed. Rico's surveillance gear captured every second. Carlos began the encounter trying to sound as official and professional as possible. "Ma'am, we're here representing the HOA to discuss your voluntary compliance. We need your signature on these documents confirming you're joining the community association." But Emma, God bless Hero, wasn't going to be bullied. "I'm not interested in joining any HOA," she said firmly. "And who exactly are you two? I've never seen either of you at a single neighborhood meeting." That's when Diego's mask dropped. "You're joining whether you like it or not," he snapped. "Sign the papers." Now, he stepped forward aggressively, using his size to try and intimidate her. But Emma didn't back down. "I'm not signing anything," she said, her voice steady. "This is harassment. Get off my property now." Diego wasn't having it. "No one says no to me," he shouted, and then took a violent step toward Emma, too fast, too forceful. In one quick, terrifying moment, he struck her. She went down hard, shocked and clearly hurt. And in that split second, something inside me snapped. That was the moment my training took over. 10 years in the army doesn't disappear when you hang up the uniform. It lies dormant, waiting for the day you need it. As I stepped out of the garage, I could feel every nerve, every muscle shifting into defense mode. Diego turned and saw me coming. "What are you gonna do, old man?" he sneered, still smirking like he had control of the situation. He had no idea what he was dealing with. The next moments happened faster than most of the neighbors could even process. I positioned myself in a solid stance, low, balanced, focused entirely on protecting Emma. Diego lunged, but I saw it coming a mile away. Thanks to my training, I knew how to move precisely, efficiently, and with control. I disarmed and restrained him quickly, using non-lethal force to end the threat without escalating violence. Carlos, panicked, tried to jump in from behind, thinking he could even the odds. Big mistake. I countered his momentum, redirected his force, and took him down just as efficiently. Both men were on the ground, disarmed, overwhelmed, but not seriously injured, just as I was trained to do. Neighbors had started to gather, drawn by the commotion. Some were already filming, capturing everything at Emma being attacked, me stepping in, and the rapid but disciplined defense that followed. I could hear their reactions. "Did he just hit his wife?" someone whispered. "That guy's a vet. He did what anyone would do to protect her." Another said. Meanwhile, Rico, parked a block away, had captured everything from multiple angles. The footage showed Diego striking Emma, her collapsing, and me reacting with restraint and precision. This wasn't a street fight. It was an appropriate, professional response to a threat. Emma was still shaken but conscious. A few neighbors with medical backgrounds came to check her for a concussion or other injuries. Seeing her hurt filled me with a kind of cold fury I had to fight to keep in check. These men had come to our home to force Emma into something she never agreed to, and when she resisted, they assaulted her. From my perspective, that made them legitimate danger that needed to be stopped. Now sitting on the ground, Carlos and Diego both looked stunned. Diego's cocky bravado had vanished. His face showed the painful recognition that he badly miscalculated. Carlos looked like he wanted to disappear entirely, clearly regretting ever working for Amy. And then, just as I expected, Amy made her appearance. Her car door slammed, and she stormed toward the scene, having watched everything unfold from her parked vehicle down the street. "Oh my God, Tom!" she shouted. "I didn't want it to happen like this. I just wanted you to realize how much you need me." The absurdity of her words hit me like a slap. She had sent these men to intimidate Emma, and now she was pretending to be horrified by the result, trying to frame herself as the concerned observer. But I wasn't playing her game anymore. Her manipulation, the lies, the stalking, the threats, it all ended here. Still in the calm, locked-in mindset that combat training brings, I turned toward her. "Your turn, Amy. You wanted confrontation. Well, here it is." For the first time, I saw fear flicker across her face. She had built her fantasy with precision, creating a new identity and weaving a false narrative around her obsession. But now, it was unraveling. She saw her so-called security team defeated and exposed, neighbors witnessing the truth, and me no longer playing defense. This was no longer the fantasy she'd constructed in her head. This was real. This was a combat veteran with nothing to lose, a broken bar and everything to protect. I had nothing left to lose, and Anadrama-nest viewers, things were reaching a breaking point. If you're watching, drop your location in the comments and tell me, do you think Amy is finally about to face justice? This moment had been weeks in the making. I'd imagined it again and again, but seeing it unfold live, with more than 50 neighbors standing in front of us, was more intense than anything I'd prepared for. Amy stood in the middle of the street, her mask slipping fast, her composure unraveling by the second. She knew exactly what was about to happen, and yet, her obsession with me held her there, frozen in place. Emma, still visibly shaken from Diego's attack, had a small group of neighbors tending to her. Several people had already called for medical help. What had started as a neighborhood confrontation had turned into something far more serious, and everyone knew it. The energy in the crowd had shifted. These weren't just curious onlookers anymore. These were people who knew Emma, who cared about her, and now they were furious. Amy had made a critical mistake, bringing violence into a quiet, tight-knit community. "Tom," Amy started, her voice brittle and panicked. "I'm sorry, I never meant for anyone to get hurt." But I could see it in her eyes. She knew she was cornered. Her carefully constructed identity, Lydia Collins, the perfect neighbor, the helpful volunteer, the charming leader, was seconds away from total destruction. Rico had set up a mobile stream station nearby, and within minutes, over 200 people were watching the drama unfold live on Anadrama-nest. I stepped forward and spoke directly to both the neighbors present and the viewers online. "Everyone, I want you to meet Amy Walsh. She used to be my employee until I fired her for theft and inappropriate behavior. After that, she got plastic surgery, changed her name, and moved here under a fake identity. All of this, just to stalk me and harass my wife." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Phones came out. People started filming. Some actually took a few steps back from Amy as the horror of what I was saying sank in. Mrs. Peterson from 3 houses down stared at Amy in disbelief. "Oh my God," she said, her voice trembling. "I defended her. I told people she was one of the good ones." I held up my phone, showing the crowd 2 photos, one of Amy Walsh from 3 years ago, and the other of her today, as Lydia Collins. The weight gain, the altered hairstyle, the plastic surgery, all of it added up. Then came the audio comparison. I played voicemails Amy had left me years ago, side by side with recent recordings of Lydia's voice. The match was undeniable. Anyone with ears could hear right if they were the same person. "I also have this," I said, holding up another document. Amy's termination letter, along with the police report I filed when she threatened retaliation after I ended her employment. More people were pouring in from surrounding streets. Word had spread quickly, and neighbors, teens, even people from a few blocks over came to see what was happening. The online viewer count was exploding. Hundreds were watching live on Anna Drama-nest. But what Amy did next shocked even me. She didn't deny it. She didn't try to salvage her fake identity. She snapped, "I love you, Tom." She screamed. The entire crowd froze, her face twisted with rage and desperation. "Everything I did, everything was for us." They weren't supposed to hurt her. They were just supposed to scare her enough that she'd give up, so you'd see that I'm the one who actually understands you. The silence that followed was suffocating. "I've been watching you for years," she said, louder now. "I know everything. Your breakfast routine, what you talk about at dinner. I've been inside your house. While you were sleeping." You could feel the fear spread through the crowd. Neighbors looked at each other in disbelief. Several people backed away from Amy. Rico whispered into his mic, making sure the live stream was catching every word. The chat was blowing up. "She's completely unhinged. That poor firmly a broken bar. Why wasn't she arrested earlier?" Diego and Carlos is still sitting where I'd left. Emma finally seemed to realize what they'd gotten mixed up in. "What the hell is this?" Diego muttered. "We were just doing HOA work. No one said anything about a stalker." Amy turned on them with venom. "Idiots!" she shrieked. "All you had to do was get her to sign. That's it. Just a little pressure so Tom would realize I'm the one who can protect him." The live stream hit over 400 viewers. Comments flew across the screen. People couldn't believe what they were watching. Carlos slowly stood up, clearly wanting no part of this nightmare. He backed away and started toward the street, muttering under his breath. Diego stayed sitting, too stunned to react, his face a mix of confusion and shame. That's when Emma, standing beside me through all of it despite still being shaken, finally spoke. "You've been in our house?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but every word was razor sharp. "You've been watching us sleep?" Amy didn't even flinch. "Of course I have. How else was I supposed to really understand Tom? I know which side of the bed he sleeps on. I know he checks the locks twice every night. I know he sometimes talks in his sleep." The realization hit me like a cold wave. Amy hadn't just watched us from the outside. She had entered our home. She had invaded our most personal, private spaces. The crowd was horrified. You could hear people calling 911 on their phones without being prompted. Some just couldn't believe it. Others were angry. A few were visibly scared. But Amy wasn't finished yet, because as she stood there exposed, rejected, and unraveling before hundreds, she realized her fantasy was finally over. Her mask was gone. Her control was gone. And what she did next, well, that changed everything. In one last desperate attempt to seize control, Amy locked eyes with Emma and screamed, "You don't understand him the way I do. I've transformed myself into the person he needs, and you don't even appreciate what you have." It was pure, raw jealousy, an explosion that revealed the full depth of Amy's disturbed mind. As sirens wailed closer, summoned by multiple 911 calls from neighbors who had witnessed Amy's confession and the earlier assault on Emma, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. But Amy wasn't done. She turned her wild gaze to me and shouted a chilling final threat. "Tom, this isn't over. You can deal with those Mina, but you can't stop my love. I'll find my way back to you." Her words sent a collective shiver through the crowd. Even facing arrest, even with her fake life crumbling around her, Amy's obsession clearly wasn't going to vanish with a pair of handcuffs. Officer Morrison was the first to arrive. One glance at the chaos was all she needed before calling for immediate backup. With dozens of eyewitnesses, video evidence, and Amy's own on-camera confession, the case was clear. She had stalked me, manipulated our neighborhood, and orchestrated violence against my wife. As they cuffed her and placed her in the squad car, Amy screamed again through the open window. "Tom, this isn't over. You might beat them, but you'll never escape me. My love for you won't stop." Morrison later told me, "Sir, we found something in her vehicle, floor plans of your home, detailed surveillance notes, and a full timeline. She's been planning this for over a year. That's when I realized prison might not be enough to stop Amy Walsh. The full investigation revealed even more horrifying truths. Police discovered notebooks filled with our family's routines, hand-drawn layouts of our house, and the most disturbing of all, the personal belongings she had stolen from us during her late-night intrusions. Emma's jewelry, my old army medals, the broken bar items we'd once thought were misplaced had actually been taken by Amy while we slept. She had built a fantasy world in her mind, one where Emma was just a temporary inconvenience, and she and I were destined to be together. The charges were severe: stalking, harassment, identity theft, trespassing, making threats, and what the district attorney called aggravated psychological terrorism. When they searched her home, investigators found evidence that Amy had been plotting her return to my life for 18 months. Since the day she was fired from my garage, she had scraped together savings, taken out loans, researched surgeons, and crafted the Lydia Collins persona, all just to reinsert herself into my life with power and control. But what truly sealed her fate was the viral storm that followed the live stream. The video of her breakdown spread like wildfire across the internet, especially on Anna Dramanest, where the live stream originated. Within hours, it was all over social media. People shared it thousands of times. Local news picked up the story by morning. By the next day, Amy Walsh had become a national cautionary tale, her face plastered across news segments under headlines like, "Obsessed former employee creates fake identity to stalk ex-boss." The fallout didn't stop with Amy. Diego and Carlos both faced serious legal consequences for their involvement. Diego, who had struck Emma and attacked me, was sentenced to 3 years in prison for assault, along with mandated community service and a restraining order barring him from coming within a mile of our home. Carlos, who had fled the scene when things escalated, was arrested 2 days later and received 2 years in prison for aiding in the harassment and intimidation. As for me, I faced no charges. Video footage clearly showed Diego throwing the first punch and Emma collapsing. My reaction, measured and restrained, was deemed self-defense. The district attorney even referred to it as a textbook case of a military veteran defending his home and family from unprovoked violence. The community rallied behind us. Dozens of neighbors submitted statements to law enforcement describing how Amy, during her time as the fake HOA president, had harassed them, bullied them, and manipulated community decisions. Amy's court hearing was unforgettable. She sat there in front of the judge, still convinced that her obsession was love. "Your Honor," she said in a trembling voice, "I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted Tom to see that we belong together. I gave up everything in my name, my fascia, to be the woman he needs." The judge didn't hesitate. Her sentence, 4 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation, mandatory psychiatric treatment, and a permanent restraining order banning her from any contact with me, Emma, or anyone in our neighborhood. But that wasn't all. Emma and I filed a civil lawsuit against Emma, and so did several of our neighbors. The court awarded us over $150,000 in damages. Amy's home was seized and sold to pay the judgments. Her savings accounts were emptied. She was left with nothing but her prison sentence and the delusion that her actions had somehow been justified by love. Our community was left shaken up but wiser. Support poured in from every corner of the neighborhood. People were stunned at how easily they'd been fooled, but grateful that the truth had come out before things became even worse. And as a final act of closure, the HOA, Amy's weapon of control, was officially dissolved. By unanimous vote, we disbanded the old HOA and formed a new, more democratic neighborhood association, at this time with proper oversight and accountability. Strangely enough, once Amy was out of the picture, property values in our area actually went up. News spread that we had handled a serious threat effectively and emerged as a stronger, more united community. To mark our collective victory over Amy's chaos, we started hosting an annual block party, and it quickly became one of the city's most beloved neighborhood traditions. People from nearby areas often reach out to us for guidance on dealing with problematic HOA boards or identifying red flags within their communities. Emma and I, though we never planned for it, have become something of a go-to couple for recognizing and responding to stalking behavior. It's a strange thing to be known for, but also deeply fulfilling to know our story might help others. What mattered most, though, was what the entire experience did for our marriage. Facing something so intensely, so invasive, only drew us closer. We learned to rely on each other in ways we never had before. Emma often tells me that watching me peel back every one of Amy's lies and protect our neighborhood was the most impressive thing she's ever seen. And honestly, seeing Emma's courage and clarity during it all made me fall for her all over again. But Amy's story didn't end behind bars, because obsession like hers doesn't just disappear in a prison cell. About 10 months into her sentence, I began receiving disturbing updates from the facility. Amy had been writing letters, hundreds of them, every one of them addressed to me. Thankfully, prison officials intercepted them before they ever reached our mailbox. According to the warden, Amy spent her days in the prison library, researching everything she could about my military background, our family history, even Emma's ancestry. She had built an entire fantasy in her mind where she and I were meant to be, and Emma was just an obstacle that needed to be erased. What truly alarmed the staff was when they discovered that Amy had begun trying to recruit other inmates. She convinced at least 2 women that she had been wrongly imprisoned, that I loved her but had to have her arrested under community pressure. She called it her reunion plan. The final straw came when officials found a detailed hand-drawn diagram of our house, including all entry points and notes about security weaknesses. She was immediately placed in solitary confinement. Then, 8 months later, the nightmare returned. I got word that Amy had been released early from the psychiatric facility. The reason? Good behavior and significant therapeutic progress. According to the review board, her caseworker claimed she'd gained insight into her actions and no longer posed a threat. But I knew better. Amy was clever, manipulative, and dangerously obsessed. There was no way 1.5 years of therapy had fixed something that broken. That very night, my home security system sent me an alert. I opened the footage and felt the blood drain from my face. There, across the street, just outside the reach of 2 streetlights, stood a figure. Her height, build, even her posture, it all matched Amy. She stood exactly as she had during her previous surveillance of our home. But this time, a broken bar, she wasn't alone. 2 taller figures loomed behind her, faces hidden by hoodies. Their stances were unmistakably aggressive. I stared harder. Then it hit me. Diego, Carlos. They were back from prison and now, standing beside Amy, as if united by revenge. Somehow, she had pulled them back into her delusion, forming a dangerous alliance against the man who had exposed them all. Amy's obsession had mutated into something even more sinister than before. I reached instinctively for my phone to call the police. Heart pounding. Round 2 had officially begun. That's where this unbelievable story wraps up here at Anadrominest. If there's one thing we've learned, it's this. Sometimes the people who seem the most helpful in your community are the ones hiding the darkest secrets. Tom's military training helped protect his family, but it was his patience, awareness, and calm strategy that truly saved them. Trust your instincts, protect those you love, and never ignore the warning signs. If this story kept you on edge, hit that like button and share it to help others stay alert to the unexpected dangers hiding in plain sight. Thanks for watching Anadrominest, where common sense steps aside and karma runs the show. Like, comment, and subscribe for your weekly dose of unbelievable true stories. See you in the next video.